Welcome to Public Square. This is Ditmir Bushati. Greetings from Harvard University, from Cambridge, in a different setup, not from Tirana. Today, my guest is Adi Ćerimagić, a senior analyst for European Stability Initiative. Welcome to Public Square, dear Adi.
Thank you for having me, Ditmir.
Let me start our conversation by asking you a specific question. You come from Bosnia and Herzegovina. You have been studying abroad at the College of Europe. You have been working hard in the EU enlargement process. You have been analyzing in the past various aspects of the enlargement process. What is your feeling about the current narratives about the enlargement process, specifically in relation to our region, to Western Balkans?
Well, it's not just narrative. I also have a sense when I speak to people from Brussels, but also from some EU member states, that they do really feel and believe that the enlargement is back on the agenda, that the new momentum has been created, and that things are going better than they have 10 years ago or 5 years ago as a result of 2022 invasion of Ukraine and recognition of Ukraine, Moldova, and Georgia at that time as potential candidates for EU membership. In reality, when I talk to them, they do have some arguments in favor of this new momentum. They do say, since 2022, we have managed to award candidate status not just to Ukraine and Moldova, but also to Bosnia and Herzegovina. We've managed to get the decision on opening of accession talks. We did open 24 chapters with Albania, and potentially in September for more chapters. So decisions have been taken by 27 EU member states more easily than before. It took much less time to convince them. It took much less time to prepare some of the decisions. So in that sense, there is a sense and there are some arguments speaking in favor of that. But I have to say, next to the narrative, next to some shifts that we have seen, my big worry goes with the level of preparedness of the countries to join the EU. And there, I have to say, taking into account European Commission's reports, not much has changed since 2022.
So, and what is your feeling when you read also various international indexes in relation to democracy, human rights, media freedom, the fight against organized crime and corruption? Do you see any correlation between the formal aspects of advancements that you were just referring to? Of the countries of the region and the real progress that has been made in these above mentioned areas? What's your view on that?
Well, Ditmir, I think that those indexes can be helpful as a reference, but when we speak about the EU accession process, I really like to stick to what the European Commission tells us in its reports. If we look more closely to how big this progress has been on the issues you've mentioned, fundamentals, but also along 33 total chapters, then at the rate that we've seen from 2022 to 2024, it would take Albania 14 years to get prepared for EU membership. Moldova, it would take 15 years, and for Ukraine and Montenegro, it would take 21 years, and countries like Bosnia and Herzegovina would never be prepared. So even the European Commission's own assessment, own reports recognize that despite the talk about the new momentum, despite member states being able to take decisions more quickly, the level of preparedness, the reforms have not delivered the results in which we could say that the countries have been more prepared. Of course, we have to see and wait for October or November when the results, when the new reports will be out. But if it confirms what we've seen last year, then the result will be that we can't with this pace, expect any of the candidates, be it in Eastern Europe or in Western Balkans, to really be prepared for EU membership by the end of this decade. This means all the talk about concrete years that the Commission has come out would be in vain and would then result with disappointments on the both side and mutual, I guess, blame game. Who is to be blamed for that not happening? But we can already now see it that things are not moving in the right direction, or have not been moving in the right direction.
Despite the encouraging words coming from Commissioner for Enlargement about possible accession dates and about new opportunities, which we have seen also with previous commissioners, I have to bring to the attention of our audience the enlargement strategy of 2018. At the time, Commissioner Hahn was speaking about 2025 as a potential date for Serbia and Montenegro, which were considered as front runners for joining European Union. And we are having this discussion together in 2025, and we are still discussing about new horizons. My very concrete question to you is there any joint exercise or commitment by European Commission and EU member states or key EU member states on the consolidation of European project when it comes to the Western Balkans? I'm asking this question because from what I have learned at school, but also from the practice, I haven't seen any enlargement yet that is taking place without having Germany at the driving seat on one hand, and coalitions of some other countries on the other hand. So I really don't see it right now.
You're absolutely right to make a reference to 2018, and although both of us are very young, there is this experience, at least from 2018, that rings familiar when we hear, for example, Commission President talking about Ukraine potentially being ready before 2030 for EU membership, or Commissioner Kos talking about Montenegro by 2026, Albania by 2027, and Moldova by 2029. That it sounds like something we have already heard. I think what is important in this debate to say is that it would be possible for these countries to be ready and to join the EU. Because if we look at previous enlargement rounds, Austria, it took 14 months to negotiate, Lithuania 34 months, Poland 56 months, Romania 58 months. And none of the countries, none of the candidates that actually successfully did their accession negotiations joined the EU without the European Commission saying that they were ready. And even when they were not ready, like in the case of Bulgaria and Romania, Commission was not willing to say, no, they are ready, but they needed to do a post-membership mechanism. So when we speak about is it possible? It is possible. It would be possible. But at the moment, I fear that we do not have all the ingredients on the table, or at least not in the play. And one you've mentioned correctly, it's the member states. Because if we go back to 2004 and 2007 enlargement round, it was already in 1999 when all EU member states in Helsinki came together and adopted conclusions saying that as of 2002, as soon as the countries are deemed ready to join the EU, that they would be joining the EU. What is the difference between 2018? First of all, we don't have that today. Member states are not ready to adopt joint conclusions saying anything similar to that, or confirming the years that the Commission representatives are sharing in public. Second, compared to 2018, indeed, none of the member states, except Hungary when it comes to Ukraine, has came out in public and said they reject the ideas from the European Commission. But not rejecting them doesn't mean that they are in favor. So what is missing at the moment is a couple of parts of the ingredients. One is the concrete goal. What is the goal? Is it really for some of these countries to be prepared and then join the EU? If it is, why don't they come together and say it so that then public administrations, support from member states, everything that we've seen in Croatia, that we've seen in Romania and Bulgaria, in 10 Central and Eastern European countries, really can translate into these countries being prepared for EU membership. Second, we do see in some of the candidates, some of the member states doing a bit more when it comes to supporting the countries to be prepared, but that's not at the level that we've seen even in the case of Croatia prior to 2013 membership. So to answer your question, I think in this debate, we need to say, well, what the European Commission says about the possibility to get countries prepared, they're right, it would be possible, but the Commission alone cannot do it. Of course, they need also candidates to be on board, but they also need member states to give the political fuel, but not just political fuel, but also to be on the ground, checking, I wouldn't say pressuring, but encouraging reforms and encouraging countries to be prepared so that then we could get to the result. And I fear at the moment, also not behind the closed doors, this is not being discussed. A lot of people I speak to, and you as well, they say, well, we never did it, although we did it. We did tell countries and we did help them prepare, and we did prepare many of them for EU membership in the past. Or they say due to other circumstances, we have the war with Ukraine, relations with the US, relations with the China, problems inside some of the EU member states of political nature. So it's difficult at this point. So all of that actually implies that the new momentum has a lot of weaknesses that, if we want to avoid big disappointment, would need to be addressed, both at political but also at the technical level.
Let me ask you in this respect a little bit about the growth plan, which is supposed to be, or which is somehow promoted by European Commission officials, but also by leaders in the Western Balkans as the main instruments. For several years, you at ESI have promoted the idea of gradual accession in the absence of political will from EU member states to move ahead with the EU accession agenda. How do you see the growth plan and the reform agenda? Can the growth plan and the reform agenda provide the structural transformation desperately needed in our region, or they will continue to be merely accompanying instruments of all, let's say, obstacles in terms of social economic development and democracy and rule of law we are facing in the region?
Well, I think discussing about the growth plan depends on what kind of questions do you ask about the growth plan. So as the debates on the new growth plan started, my most important question to anyone working on it was, okay, let's imagine we do have the best case scenario and the reform agendas that the Commission agrees with the candidates are fully implemented by December 2027. Can you answer me to what extent these countries will improve their level of preparedness for the EU membership along the 33 chapters? And the initial answers were along the lines of, well, that's not the point of the growth plan. The growth plan point is, yes, we want to improve on the fundamentals, on the rule of law, but it's not an exchange for EU accession and negotiations, and each country is at its own level, etc., etc. You can also approach it to what level does what the new growth plan brings on the table with the Western Balkans is new. And there as well, the answers are relatively poor. The money, yes, it's new, but much of it is not grants, it's loans. Second, if we talk about the concrete offers coming from the new growth plan related to closer gradual integration into single markets or into some other benefits. Not much of it is new for the countries that are not members of the EU. This is the key point. It is new, like something like SEPA for Western Balkans, but it is not new, or roaming or things like that we had previously, which are not part, of course, of the growth plan. But much of it is, in fact, bringing Western Balkans to the level of what the EU has offered, for example, to Ukraine and Moldova through their more modernized free trade agreements. And the third question is that I always ask is to how much of the resources implementation of this growth plan will take, not just candidate countries, which have difficulties in their public administrations, but also for the European Commission. And there the answers are different. Some countries, some candidate countries have really focused fully on the new growth plan because simply they don't have resources to play on two different fields at the same time. A European Commission as well has invested quite a lot of resources to come up, to go through the reforms, to provide comments, etc. So if you look at it through those three questions that I look at it through, and I leave it really to others also to look at it through other let's say aspects. For me, this is worrying because it's not going to get countries prepared for EU membership. It's not going to significantly prepare them for EU membership. And in fact, even if everything is implemented, it will bring Western Balkans at the level of what EU has as an offer for Ukraine and Moldova. On top of that, the initial assessments that we see from the European Commission point that implementation of these reforms is not going well. For example, by June 2025, they were expected to implement 129 steps, five candidate countries in the Western Balkans. Only 9 were implemented, 7 in Montenegro and 2 in North Macedonia, which shows that, even there you can have it from 2 different ways. But for me, it is a bit new growth plan is not succeeding even to engage, to get the energy out of the public administrations and politicians in the region to work on it seriously. So the question is why? And I fear that, and this is my last point on the new growth plan, why I'm skeptical towards it, is that the conclusion in Brussels and some EU member states might be that, Western Balkan countries do not want it. So, we offer them, there was something on the table, but they're not even doing well there. Well, the problem from the start was that the offer was not big enough, that the communication of such a complex plan which is in fact very technical, very different for every candidate. In fact, does not allow politicians to easily communicate what it is and what is it about.
Speaking about concrete things that would allow politicians to easily communicate with their own constituencies, but that would also wake up somehow citizens from the lethargy in the Western Balkans when it comes to this process. Why it is so difficult, according to your viewpoint, for European Union to offer some facilities and access to some programs for citizens of Western Balkans or for Western Balkans? First, roaming, for instance. We see that from 1st of January, it's gonna be in force for citizens of Ukraine and Moldova. In Western Balkans, in terms of population, in terms of size, it's uncomparable with Ukraine. It's much more integrated in terms of even geographical proximity. It has been waiting on the queue since 2003 Thessaloniki summit. Speaking about SEPA, I experienced myself with our own daughter that is studying this year in the Netherlands, that We are not yet fully part of SEPA, and unfortunately, we won't be fully part of SEPA until our countries are joining European Union. You need to open a bank account if you are not an EU national and if you are not coming from an EU member state. The banking transfers again are more costly than within countries that are part of SEPA. We can also speak about Schengen, especially with Bulgaria and Romania joining the Schengen area, following Croatia. The Western Balkans, it's geographically speaking, I think it's not in a vulnerable situation when it comes to the road traffics and illegal migration of movement of workers. We have seen in the case of Turkey during 60s, but we have seen also after the war in Ukraine. Or the most important element, why not to waive university fees for students coming from Western Balkans and making them feel part of Europe rather than feeling part of a periphery where some of the European problems are being dumped, such as refugee or migration camps or lithium exploitations and things like that. What's your view on that?
Well, if I can answer to your initial part of the question, I would say the reason why these things are so difficult is that because empirically, if you look at the United Kingdom and the Brexit, if you look at what's happening in Ukraine, Moldova, but also Western Balkans, there are two ways. You can be inside the EU as a full member or inside the European Union single market and Schengen zone to enjoy the benefits of the EU integration process and to be then able to communicate them properly despite all the difficulties, despite all the challenges. The fact that Switzerland remains part of the Schengen, despite all the debates going on inside the Switzerland where, with a referendum, they could be out, but they're not because the citizens are aware of what the benefits of it are, or the fact that after Brexit, after everyone saw what has happened in the United Kingdom and how the life became so much difficult, not anyone is asking anymore to get out of the EU. There are those who are demanding reform of the EU, but not to leave the EU. So you can be inside, as I said, EU as a full member or inside the single market and the Schengen zone, or you can be out. If you're out, then it's very complicated. Then it's very difficult. Then it's very fragmented. Then the communication doesn't succeed because the citizens, as soon as they come on the border, they are aware that they're not part of it. Or as soon as they want to send something, or as you said, transfer the money or something else. So the real question for the EU is, can they offer a full integration of the countries? If not, what can they offer while they're waiting for the answer to the first question? And so far, we have seen this gradual integration, phasing in, you can call it how you wish. But what we've seen as a result of it is that when it's successful, like we've seen partly in transport community, partly in energy community, but also with SEPA, which I'm told is going to come also into in Albania, but it will take a bit more time before it becomes fully functioning. People will feel the benefits, but amount of resources, amount of the time needed to achieve that, and then the result of it will not change neither fully transform the everyday life of citizens, nor it will have the political effect inside those countries or in the relationship between EU and those countries. So I think I think in this debate on EU enlargement, gradual integration, etc., we have been asking often wrong questions and we've been getting wrong answers. I think the question should be, how do we get these countries? We should first understand that yes, EU can have deep relationship with countries that are outside of the EU, outside of the EU single market or the Schengen zone. But these relationships are then troubled. EU does not have the result that it has inside its own members. And the situation there, it can sometimes and very often go its own way without EU having influence. So I think the question for the EU should be, do they want Western Balkans, Ukraine, and Moldova to be in the orbit of the EU? Do they want to have these countries prosper like the EU member states? And do they want to have impact in these countries? If the answer to that question is yes, then the answer, what they need to do is actually very clear. They need to say all these countries will and can, and we will work on that, become members of the European Union. But in the case when these countries are ready, when we help them prepare really with the concrete support from member states and from Brussels, if the EU for any reason, referendum in France, parliamentary decision in Denmark, this membership is not on the table and does not materialize, then at least these countries will be able to enjoy all four freedoms and be potentially able to join the Schengen zone. Then the debate is completely different. Then the EU has a clear vision for the region, and the countries which want to work on the reforms and want the support will achieve that. And that then would be a game changer. All else, empirical evidence proved not to have good results, despite within particular industries or parts of the population having some benefits of closer integration with the EU, of course, be beneficial. But overall, these kind of things did not work for the EU. And in the today's world, will work even less.
I fully subscribe to your arguments about the position of EU, as it seems to me that geopolitics alone cannot open the door of European Union. So there is a need for more political appetite from EU member states to finalize or to complete the accession process with its own underbelly, because I consider Western Balkans, as we are surrounded by EU member states, an underbelly of European Union. And your rhetorical questions about the will of EU is bringing me to the last question of our conversation, as I see that the time is running. Uh, I followed a little bit the debate at Bled, the leaders' debate with PMs from Albania and Montenegro, Croatia, and Slovenia, and our common friend Natalie Tozzi, who was moderating the debate, was insisting on the importance of Western Balkans for European Union. And I don't think that the case was made in that panel why Western Balkans is important for European Union in this larger geopolitical picture that EU has to navigate with other global players. What's your view on that? So, why is the Western Balkans important for the EU? What would be your main arguments?
I think not just Western Balkans, but also the entire enlargement policy is simply part of a much wider debate going around European Union, and that is what will be of European Union in 5 to 10 years, not just when it comes to its economic strength, but also its political strength. And anyone thinking seriously about having the EU in 10 to 15 to 20 years and being vital and being strong and being independent and being able to have the abilities that it has today, or even become much more stronger, would need to recognize that the world around the European Union is changing. And I think a lot of people in the EU feel that. Where I miss on the debate on the Western Balkans is the understanding of what I've briefly sketched and mentioned, and that is that if you really want to have the Western Balkans, which are surrounded by the EU member states, surrounded by Schengen zone and Eurozone, of which 3 are NATO members and close military necessary allies of many of the EU member states, then you do need to have a policy, then you do need to have a strategy for the region. And I think there one needs to recognize that the strategy of this partiality of promises that do not have full backing of all EU member states will not work, and that if it doesn't work, then we will have a lot of disappointments, not just in the region, but also inside the EU. And then the EU will not be able to be a player or to exercise impact in the region, which means that potentially, as we've seen in Beijing with President Vučić being there, we will see more and more leaders in the region turning elsewhere, and then those countries having more exercise more power inside the region, which is, as said, surrounded by the EU, but half of it is also part of the NATO. Relationship with the US is also another reason. US is very present in the Western Balkans. We've spoken about lack of ambassadors, not appointed, but if you talk to diplomats, US is there. It's active. It has its policies in Kosovo. It has its policy on Bosnia and Herzegovina. Much of it is aligned with the current EU policy, luckily. But it's the question, how long will that be the case? In many other aspects, US is no longer on the same page with the EU. So also in relations to the US, EU does need to be active in the Western Balkans, does need to be taken seriously in the Western Balkans in order not to, just have these traditional Russia, China, and some other countries, but also have a much more severe competition with the US. But to achieve that, as I said, EU needs a clear policy, and it needs a clear goal, and it needs a goal that all member states can come behind it, and that can then be explained and translated in the Western Balkans. Otherwise, the Western Balkans will have its own developments. I really sometimes struggle when I speak to diplomats or politicians from the EU who cannot really, think of, Western Balkans turning into what we've seen in Georgia or what we've seen in some other countries that were at some point in orbit of the EU. I mean, talking about it's many do think still that Serbia is in the orbit of the EU, but there is a lack of imaginations that things in the Western Balkans can have its own course that does not depend on the EU, where the EU does not have influence. And I think that is the reason why the EU needs to be more serious, needs to be more concrete, needs to be more optimistic on what it can achieve in the Western Balkans. Because I think with proper goals, with proper policy, with proper resources, it could really achieve a lot in the Western Balkans.
Adi Ćerimagić, it was a pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Likewise.